Welcome to And Ninthly,
an Inside Number 9 podcast.
with your host, me, David.
And me, John.
Well, hello, John.
Well, hello, David.
Back in the And Ninthly bunker.
I prefer to think of it as a... Hang on. It's coming. It's coming. A mine.
There you go. Really worth waiting for.
Really worth waiting for. Just for listeners won't see the shocked and embarrassed face I just pulled at my own poverty of wit.
Well, we're mining a wealth of insights.
Oh, there it is.
That's what we're doing.
Oh, dear God.
And on that note, we're here to talk about the second series of this new start again.
Oh, you're allowed to stop and start again when you fuck up, are you? But I just have to keep going and end up staying in the edit. Brilliant.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, posterity. I weight posterity a little bit in my favour.
Yeah.
Which is a good trick if you can manage it. So we're back to talk about episode 2 of series 8 of Inside Number 9, which is Mother's Ruin, which aired just the other day. Got the actual air date here. It was the 27th of April, 2023. Showing off.
I don't think I've ever been so tense waiting to see how
I was just a second before I got to
pronounce the year. Yeah, that little pause. You all heard that little pause, listeners.
It was actually an hour. I had like a breakdown. You had to put a towel over me and everything.
Am I going to say 2033? 2012-2?
Somehow managed it. Kept the minecart on the tracks there. This one's directed by George Kane, who directed the Bones of St. Nicholas. Same director, and it looks like he's lined up to direct the one that's on next week at the time of recording as well, episode 3. So we can see if we can see any sort of stylistic similarities when we get there. So Mother's Ruin, we obviously just watched this for the first time the other day. I've seen it twice. Have you seen it? You seen it twice as well, John?
I have seen it twice. Yeah.
Right. Good.
I've seen it twice, and I'm glad I have. By the way. For reasons I have no doubt we will be discussing. So spoilers, everyone.
Yeah, spoilers all over the place. So I guess I'll start. So I watched this one last week, and it's a little bit like we talked about the Bones of St. Nicholas. Actually, I think I had quite similar reactions for different reasons to both of them, which was initial underwhelmed feeling, and I think I was pretty, again, it's the sort of the occasion, isn't it? The Bones of St. Nicholas was one thing, but this was the occasion of, start of a proper new series, Inside Number 9, and, you have high hopes for that. And I'd also heard that they were doing something particularly grisly in this one. I hadn't had any plot-specific spoilers, but I heard they were talking about, the fact that they'd done one of the sort of, I guess, like goriest horror things, almost extreme horror things that they'd done in it. And obviously, it's obvious what bit they're talking about there. And in a sense, it didn't disappoint, but it wasn't particularly... It wasn't horror of the imaginative sort, really. It was just sort of Grand Guignol, kind of Saw movie-esque kind of excess in that sense. So that wasn't... I didn't have the best reaction to that. And I think some of the... I'm not sure if I would say that the writing's up there with the subtleties of the Bones of St. Nicholas, but some of the subtleties that they are putting into the writing probably went a bit over my head on the first watch. And also, this will be a whole part of the discussion, but, what they do with the ending didn't really work for me the first time. I think pretty much all that stuff worked better for me on the rewatch, and I think I enjoyed the guest performances more as well for what they were, for the sort of tenor of what they were going for with that. How about you?
I enjoyed it. I don't know that I was either over or underwhelmed. I was perfectly whelmed.
It's that rare case of a whelming.
Rare case of a whelming, where my whelm level was perfectly temperate. I tried to avoid knowing anything about it at all. So actually, I knew nothing bar the title and the publicity still, which I think I immediately said to you, it's like all Pemberton's in drag, which one naturally assumed is because he was playing a woman. Usually when you see one of them in drag in a publicity still, it's because they are playing a female character. So I guess actually I what little expectations I had were pretty quickly overturned, because it turns out that Pemberton is not in drag playing a woman. Pemberton's character has to dress up as a woman. So that was an interesting twist on that for me, actually.
We both basically thought we were going to have a conversation that we probably don't have to in the context of this episode, really, didn't we? About the sort of their use of drag in general, and what place it has in this day and age and in their work. And I don't think this episode really demands that, although it'd be an interesting conversation to have.
Well, it doesn't demand having that conversation, but it also, I wonder how cognizant of that they are as well, and kind of went, okay, well, have they taken criticism for that, or are they questioned for how much one of them dresses up in order to play a female character? Did they kind of go, oh well, fuck you then, we'll find a different way of doing it, we'll make it part of the plot instead, where one of us has to dress up as a woman instead? I don't know, it's difficult to say, but I wonder if there is an element of that, of one of us is going to dress up as a woman, but it's the character that's dressing up as a woman, and this is not in fact us dragging up in order to play a particular character. It starts off being a little bit. I mean, we're witnessing a burglary. It's reminiscent of A Quiet Night In immediately, isn't it?
I thought of that even when it was on. Yeah.
There's there's kind of an immediate pratfall. He's coming through the window, but he kicks over all the saucepans. And then Pemberton turns up, and he's fundamentally the character from Death Be Not Proud, right? Apart from the pudding bowl haircut.
Oh, you mean the Psychoville character?
Yeah, exactly. Which I still haven't seen. Update. But he's the same status and intelligence level, and he's doing the same voice.
Yeah,
and he's got a pair of geeky, badly fitting glasses on, and then at that point, part of me was kind of thinking, oh, we seem to be treading quite close to just sort of revisiting characters, which, as we've discussed before, is something they've certainly flirted with before. I think didn't you mention that they planned on making? Was it Mr. King? They thought about revisiting the character from Tom and Jerry.
That's right. Yeah. They apparently did consider that up to a fairly late scripting stage. I mean, it's funny, isn't it? Because I saw some old League fans and stuff even just leaping over the fact that Reece Shearsmith's character in this is called Edward, and Pemberton addresses him as Edward as his intro line in the episode, and that's Tubbs and Edward from the League, and it's enough for someone to have a first name that's so associated with one of their characters, that it almost feels like a reference just in itself. It actually, before you have the drag thing, Shearsmith drags up later in the episode as well, doesn't he? But it's just through performance and voice,
Well, yeah, he impersonates. Yes, he pretends to impersonate his mother's voice.
Yeah, but I just thought I'd mention that before we get into that. I think, I mentioned when we talked about The Bones of St. Nicholas that I thought that episode does really well for Shearsmith and Pemberton's performances. They made good choices there, and that worked well in that. I think this might be an episode, if this episode succeeds, I think it might succeed more despite the choices in that respect, without sounding too bitchy about it. I think Pemberton is going back to sort of trodden ground a bit with his, the way he plays this character. I think you could maybe heap a bit more praise on Shearsmith because he gets to do, as well as playing a sort of slightly generic, EastEnder, he gets to do the fake possession stuff, so he gets to act out more. But that's also very, if people know the League well, there's a sort of final episode of series 3 when Papa Lazaru's acting possessed, sort of Exorcist spoof tone to that as well. So I think that they're maybe going to back to things that they've done before here, and maybe not with the best effect, maybe.
Perhaps, yes. I mean, certainly on the first viewing, before it's actually revealed that this is not a possession, when we're kind of, we're invited to believe it as well. I mean, but it's also very OTT. So again, on the second viewing, I saw it as a reasonably sophisticated turn, because it's just over the top enough to, I think, make you question it. To question whether this is what's actually happening. And actually, mostly what was going through my head was just like, oh, he's enjoying himself, isn't he? Reece Shearsmith's having a lovely time. He's having a ball doing this.
Yeah, no, I think there was a lot of that involved with it. And, talking people having a ball, mentioned the guest characters in this, because the guest stars in this are Anita Dobson and Phil Daniels. Both, if people know their work at all, they've got a sort of cachet in British pop culture as, playing East End characters. They've both been in the sitcom, in the soap opera EastEnders, for example, and obviously
sitcom. It's a sitcom.
Yeah, I was having to. It's funny. I'll touch on this again later, but I'm by upbringing, I'm a Coronation Street person, not an EastEnders person, and yes, it does have to be one or the other. And to the extent I think I remembered he had been in EastEnders relatively briefly. I knew when I read up about her, I was like, oh, okay, so she played Angie Watts. That's quite an iconic EastEnders character. I know that. Yeah. But I think a lot of the pleasure that EastEnders fans would get from watching this, I didn't get. What I was going to say on first viewing, I just don't get, because I don't watch EastEnders. So, but I can so imagine if they'd cast a couple of Corrie stars in it, as indeed they did in The Poems of St. Nicholas. They've kind of, it's weird that they're two in a row like that. I would have loved, the relish with which like Dobson and Daniels are both playing these characters. It would have been a whole other layer of fun on top of that, I think, if it had been Corrie regulars for me. Were you ever much of an EastEnders person?
When I lived at home, I had to be, because it was watched whenever it was on. And bear in mind, I'm of a vintage, David. I just about remember the first episode. I remember them breaking into, I've forgotten his name, the guy who dies in the very first episode, who they find his body back in, God, where are we? 80-something, 83, 84. And then you get, I do remember the very famous Christmas episode, which was Angie and Den and the divorce papers. And this was...
Yeah. That's passed into sort of British pop culture history now, isn't it?
Yeah, it has, because it was, the BBC going, we're going to put on a special Christmas episode of our popular soap opera, and it's just going to be a really unhappy relationship where they're both just going at each other.
Yeah.
In a really, really intense, quite frankly, horrific, uncomfortable way. In a lot of ways, it's Anita Dobson was doing something quite different, was steering fairly far away from her EastEnders character, from rightly so, from Ange. And I don't really think, I'd tapped out of I'd left home and didn't have to watch EastEnders anymore by the time Phil Daniels was in it. So, my associations with Phil Daniels are largely Quadrophenia and Blur songs.
Yeah, I was going to say, if people don't know any of this stuff we're talking about, but know the band Blur, he's the guy who does the monologues in the Single Part Life. That's a thing that Phil Daniels is culturally known for.
Which I can actually highly recommend if you are watching anything with Phil Daniels in it, and you want to amuse yourself ever so slightly more, is you just have to wait for a pause after he's said a line, and then you just go Part Life. It's a really fun game to play with. You
could play that quite a lot in this episode.
You could play it a lot in this episode. However, I think he turned Phil Daniels up to 11. Which I really enjoyed, and clearly he was having a whale of a time as well. Just while we're talking about Anita Dobson as well, I know I mentioned this to you before. I really hope Brian May, who is her husband, was on set at some point. I don't know why. It would just amuse me that the Queen guitarist would be hanging around in the background of them filming this incredibly weird, slightly gory episode of Inside Number 9.
Well, he's a doctor, isn't he? He may be advised on the foot sawing scene.
He's not a medical doctor, is my understanding. He's
No, but any doctor will do, John.
Okay. So Dr. Brian Cox would also be able to advise on any lower back problems you have, presumably.
God, I hope so. I'm seeing him on Wednesday.
Just make sure it's the right Brian Cox, otherwise.
Well, the other one will eat you.
Fuck off! There's nothing wrong with you. Fuck off!
That is what he sounds like.
It's exactly what he sounds like. It's almost like he was in the room.
So, I mean, it's I definitely enjoyed, particularly on rewatch, I enjoyed quite a lot of elements of this, despite my sort of griping about some of the performance choices from the two regulars. I think it's a great example of that one that has a great turn when just because they in the first sort of 10 minutes of the episode they're getting really into the incantation stuff and the stuff about summoning and necromancy, and and it starts elevating up and up, and they have that bit where Shearsmith tries to sacrifice the parrot and it escapes out the window, and then he's seemingly about to sacrifice his brother, and then it's rare that the turn in the episodes is literally like a light going on, isn't it? But but the couple come home, the light switch goes on, and it becomes a different genre, which is tends to be fun, and you could argue it revisits horror or supernatural horror towards the end, and certainly there's a fake out of it doing so. We were talking before about Shearsmith's sort of performance as his dead mother, but I think I just enjoyed that more. There was a sort of energy to the fact that it becomes you get stuck in the room with these sort of Cockney pantomime villains almost, and that's like a fun horror subgenre as well of sort of torture porn, and some elements of the gangster genre obviously verge towards horror, and I think I enjoyed that. It was something they hadn't really done before.
Well, I think the last one we described as this was The Referee's a Wanker, but there's something Pinteresque about it as well, about these two very earthy East End characters with this quite loaded status relationship where one of them is very high and one of them is very low, but the one who is low status has some kind of hold over the person who is high status, be it through kinship or through guilt or some kind of malign secret or something like that. So I spent the first kind of half of it thinking, this is all very supernatural stuff aside, it's all very Pinteresque. But yeah, you're right. As soon as that light goes on in a very glaring, everything's about to change, here's your inciting incident kind of a way, and then it goes to a completely different place. But yeah, Pinteresque up to that point, I guess. And then it becomes Sexy Beast meets Guy Ritchie meets Saw meets I don't know, something supernatural.
Yeah, it's when we talk about the Bones of St. Nicholas, we were sort of talking about the different rules and sort of different supernatural rules that might be present in any given Inside Number 9, and it's interesting now, isn't it, as we go through the 8th series, that because we've seen other episodes of this where necromancy or something like it, or body possession, or summoning, all those things have been shown to be possible in Inside Number 9. But again, part of the joy of the show is you just never know which one you're in, right? And this one might play by completely different rules. So I quite like the first 10 minutes taking, having a few jokes at the expense of all the ritual and stuff, but basically you're in a world where this might work. And I like that the episode arguably ends where you're in a world where you're still not sure if it works. That's a good thing in my eyes about the episode. I suppose that's hinting at the ending, really. But
it is, and I'm not going to comment on that until we properly talk about the ending, because I think I'm probably going to come down quite firmly on one side rather than another. What I did want to say though is, as you mentioned, it's George Kane directing it again, who directed The Bones of Christmas, and something I spotted because I rewatched them both together the other night. There's a little visual echo as well, in that I think I actually wrote down as it started coming up on the screen. We welcome back our dear friend, the pentagram. The classic trope of all occultish horror stuff. They've used pentagrams on the floor before, right? They must have used pentagrams. I couldn't precisely tell you where, but I'm pretty sure there are.
It feels like something must have been like that in the Harrowing or something like that, you know.
Yeah, I think it's got to be in the Harrowing anyway. But there's lots of symbols around the outside of the pentagram. There's also some really visually interesting symbols in the bones of St. Nicholas as well. When he's climbing up the tower and he lifts his lamp up the wall until he gets to the one that obviously contains the jaw. There's lots of kind of weird hieroglyphic, occulty kind of symbols. Either were I slightly more of a nerd, or if I didn't have quite as busy a day at work today, I would actually have screen grabbed the two to see if any of the symbols are actually the same. Because I'd be curious to see, possibly just purely coincidentally, but you know, if we've got one director with a certain visual style, and I think this is his first outing with Inside Number 9, isn't it? Is that right, or has he directed any of the previous episodes?
Yeah, this George Kane. I'll have to go back and check. The only one I've got in front of me is the Bones of St. Nicholas. But yeah, I'll go back and have a look how much he's been in. We can talk about that next episode.
Yeah, but I think I'll certainly be curious to see if there's any kind of runic symbols cropping up anywhere next week.
Yeah, that's a good thing for us to keep an eye on. We've given up on wigs. Now it's the runic symbol.
Yeah, it's not the wigs. It's the runes. But
it's all in the runes.
We'll go back to the wigs.
Yeah, well, we tend to.
Everything will always come back to the wigs.
Do you think? I guess this isn't quite the ending, but there's something before the ending that I want to quiz you on. But before that, I mean the scene where Shearsmith sort of talks Phil Daniels into cutting off his foot. Well, he wants him to cut off his toe, doesn't he? And then he escalates to the foot. I'm gonna
have to take off the whole plate.
That's right. Yeah, that was impressively unpleasant. I can't really watch things like that directly. You know, when they're doing the whole sort of saw going towards flesh and bone and stuff. You know, I can't. No matter how much you end up seeing, because I can't remember if you actually see the initial point of contact here, but you know, you certainly see it. You see enough.
You see the initial point of contact, and then you see the blood spattering on Phil Daniels' mask, and then you go back to see it kind of slightly further into the foot. I don't know. I must be massively desensitized. I just didn't think it looked particularly realistic compared to all the other times I've seen someone having their foot sawn off. Obviously, it really didn't do anything for me. It did nothing for me other than the thought. Or I wonder how this is going down with other people. I wonder if people are finding this shocking. I wonder if there is still shock value in pretending that someone's having their foot sawn off. It didn't seem graphic enough, and also it was such a clean slice. Like there was nothing. It was, there was no straggling little sinews or veins or anything.
I bet they had conversations about that stuff though.
Yeah, I'm sure. I don't know. It just I don't know, felt a bit nothingy to me.
I think this came up in a previous series when we were talking about Inside Number 9, but I always do try and, especially when there's real horror moments in them, I always try and think about Inside Number 9 from the perspective of the adolescent who's stayed up late to watch it, or doesn't quite know what they're in for. And I think it's fun to imagine how this might stick in the mind of, say, an 11-year-old or something. It's kind of, this would be something they'd remember vividly having watched before they were quite ready for it. I think it has a value there, which I'm sure they're very aware of, because so many of their influences were things like that.
Oh, we're different generations though. 11-year-olds now are watching that kind of stuff day and night, aren't they?
Yeah, they're all buying firearms on the dark web. That's my alarmist take on the youth of today. What I liked about this was actually, how unpleasant it stays even when it's getting funny. So, the way that they do the sort of aftercare for his stump. She gets.
I really liked that. I really liked the little tin, banging that onto his foot.
Because that's where because he's chewing on the sort of wooden spoon, but that's where his reaction is just perfectly pitched to be horrific because of the pain he's going through, but also, oh no, what more? It's going this far, is it? It's just kind of it's. That's a perfect blending of the horror and the comedy, isn't it? Because his reactions are horrific and also hilarious at the same time, and because having your foot sawn off is such an extraordinary thing to even try and imagine, but having something like banged roughly onto something that's already in pain is just, that there's something so mundane about that, but it was great. Do you think, because we were talking before about how, on last week's episode, on the last episode, about how well the sort of writing supports the Bones of St. Nicholas and the plot there, I thought there was a bit of a, maybe just misfire bit here where, the way the plot resolves is that Anita Dobson's character, thinks through this sort of fake necromancy performance thing that Phil Daniels has been cheating on her, and kills him. And then she just sort of goes to bed. I know it's a comedy.
No, she doesn't. Specifically, she says, "I'm going to go and catch up on women who kill."
yeah, which is quite funny. But I was thinking, even in something that's a dark comedy, is that, because she basically says, you two let yourself out, basically. And I'm like, I know she's just gone through this thing. I mean, basically that whole twist, I think it sort of works. It definitely, on a comic level, it works, which is part of the level it's meant to work on, obviously, because you sort of, especially on the rewatch, I was like, okay, well, they're setting her up as a thoroughly superstitious character. Not too bright as well, but thoroughly superstitious and is into this sort of stuff and believes in tarot readings and, clairvoyance and stuff like that, So this performance of the dead mother coming back to impart wisdom, she's the one who allows them to go through with it. She insists, and she would obviously be credulous of that. So all that sort of tracks. But I think to then set up the final ending bit of the episode, it seems a bit, I don't know, glib's the right word, or just kind of a bit lazy to just have her exit the episode effectively,
Yeah, I can see what you're saying there. I think that, I don't think it has the same level of sophistication as the Bones of St. Nicholas, certainly, and a number of other episodes. And I don't think they all have to. I think I think to an extent they're getting from plot beat to plot beat, and they're kind of slightly using, I don't know, maybe they've written themselves into a corner because they wanted to have this, cockney gangster couple into it, but they don't want them to be there at the end. So you have to come up with a way. You have to come up with a way of getting them out of the way. Now, that's either, I guess, another character turning up and turning everything on its head, or some kind of incident. It's all worked for me. I didn't even really go down obviously I went down the supernatural angle of Edward has just, ventriloquized his dead mother. But also Edward alludes to it early on when they first meet them, that, he obviously knows that, that Phil Daniels was shagging his mother. He knows that as a fact. That's why he uses it, because he alludes to it. So, I think it's fair to say that maybe she's got her suspicions anyway, and these suspicions are just confirmed by that. I don't think it necessarily comes that out of the blue of, I've just had a ghost tell me that, that my husband was cheating on me with her when she was alive. I think, there may well be some, it may come from a much deeper psychological place. Maybe I'm overreaching here.
Well, no. I think it's more just like, I know she's a pretty broad comic character and she serves a plot function, and I don't mind her killing him. It's OTT, but I think it works in terms of what they set up. It's just her leaving after that, essentially.
Okay.
Just to allow the last literal 2 minutes to happen.
Yeah, maybe. What else is she going to do though?
I suppose so. I suppose maybe have those two kill each other or something like that.
I'm going to go and catch up on women who kill when you wake up.
Yeah.
Don't be here, and I'll clean up that mess later.
She's basically shown to be unhinged, and I suppose in some sense grateful to them because they've opened her eyes or whatever. But she's clearly insane. So is a character. So it's like, in a sense, if you're dealing with an insane character, maybe they would do that. So it's and before people think I'm taking it too seriously, it's funny. Yeah. So it works on that level. But I just, it was one of the few moments where I'm watching Inside Number 9 and in a way that isn't to do with the supernatural, I'm like, that wouldn't happen. And it's one of the few moments I found myself catching that, basically.
Yeah. There was script-wise, I think it was mostly on the first viewing that I wondered if they were going to go, or it felt like they'd nearly gone too far with the Cockney rhyming slang.
Yeah,
Like they were being a bit heavy-handed with it. It felt a bit like the punning in Wuthering Heist. It felt a bit like you might push this. This might be a bit too rich for my taste. This might be a bit too chocolatey for me to entirely enjoy the texture of.
Well, that's a bit panto as well, isn't it? Because it's a running gag, and then you even get, you get the boys' reactions, even though they're terrified, that you get their sort of like satisfied, like, oh, when they get it, or when it's explained to them, and that. I think that's all quite charming, but I agree. It's kind of. I think sometimes the comic seasoning of Inside Number 9, when you see it, you sort of clock it happening in a way that you don't maybe the other elements of the plot when you're watching it for the first time, and you kind of, if you're not in the mood for it, you just kind of like, okay, here's the comic bit.
Yeah, I think so. But then I think I forgave everything when hearing Anita Dobson saying, "You fucking baby, it's not even Harris Tweed you're smoking, it's potpourri." And all, fine. Use the Cockney rhyming slang as much as you like now, guys.
Well, it's the balance between horror and comedy in all of Inside Number 9, isn't it? Because I kind of, in the first 10 minutes they're doing the incantation stuff, Shearsmith's doing the incantation stuff, and you literally have Pemberton sort of leaning into shot behind him to talk about getting stains out of the carpet, and it's just, or out of a wood floor rather, and it's just, in that moment I was getting quite into the incantation stuff and necromancy, so I was kind of like, oh, come on, just let it sit, guys, just let the spookiness of it sit, especially if you're going to undermine it later with the lights coming on and stuff, but I mean, that's in retrospect. But I think that's, I think because they walk such a delicate tightrope in making this show at all, when they're not really firing on all cylinders, it shows. And I don't think that's even a great indictment against them. I think that's just, they're doing such a difficult thing, basically, with every episode of Inside Number 9, that if they don't get it almost completely right, and obviously that's subjective, but if they don't get it almost completely right for you, the viewer, it'll start to seem grating, won't it?
I think I'd agree with you there, actually. I think, this is not going to make a top 10 best of, I suspect. And I do wonder when they're writing, because there is so much variety in what they do, and also there's so much variety in the nature of the conceit that they've set themselves. This one felt a little bit like they had, the outline of the plot, they had the outline of the episode and the characters to an extent, and then they had to go back and put more gags in, if you see what I mean. And it felt like, maybe the gags didn't naturally arise out of the situation. The gags, maybe they did. Am I contradicting myself here? But things like, getting the stain out of the floorboards, and coming back and going, oh no, I remember what it was, and using that as a little bit of a running gag, and the whole Father Brown stuff. It felt a bit like they knew they needed good jokes in there, and they are good jokes, and it maybe tonally unbalanced it slightly. And maybe that's to do with, the whole ritualistic stuff happening in the first place, and Reece Shearsmith being, absolutely the straight man, where everyone's doing a big character here. Everyone's doing a big character, and it's only really when he ventriloquizes the mother that he gets to, let rip. But aside from that, it almost felt like they were there were the three of them acting in a slightly different play to the play that Reece Shearsmith's in. And maybe
which is in itself is a sort of classic comic technique.
Maybe it's slightly tonally unbalanced. I did want to say, though, the gags that I really loved were the Miss Marple's, Cliff Richard's Trivial Pursuit, and then coming back to Phil Daniels saying, oh, we've got a regular Sherlock Holmes and Miss Marple's, which lovely, beautiful, beautiful writing.
No, that was really good. I enjoyed that. Well, let's talk a bit about that ending. And just before, sort of as a product, I guess, or as a build into that, we were talking about things we might have seen elsewhere in Inside Number 9, or that are reminiscent visually of this. I realised on my rewatch, there's the scene where the parrot has flown out the window, and then I think it's just after the couple have come back when you see the parrot outside in a tree looking into the flat. And I just realised that's very reminiscent of Wise Owl last series. You know, in both episodes, you've got scenes where a bird is looking into this sort of scene of trauma, basically looking from outside in a tree branch into this home where this thing's happening. And it's I don't think I'm going to stretch it too far, but obviously Wise Owl being what it's about is about a parent incarnated as a bird, in a dark way. And it's interesting that has a little echo in this,
I think that's good. I think that's an interesting reading. For me, I think that's a reach. Honestly, I think it's more we have to show that the parrot's still there because otherwise it's not going to make sense when it comes back. I think it's as simple as that. I think it's just film grammar that you have to let us know that the parrot hasn't flown very, very far away. So we therefore have to see that it's stayed within the grounds of the house, so that it's so that we don't waste any time wondering about it when it comes back. That's the other thing, and I where the direction is so good and the writing is so good is I think they know where we don't want the audience to waste time worrying about this little point that's not relevant, as in where why has the parrot come back. So all it takes is a little shot of it's still here, it's sat in the branch of the tree outside, so we don't need to worry about it when it comes in. So I think that's more of a technical thing than, but yeah, I like the reading of maybe in the next episode, I don't know, we'll have a toucan watching
a malevolent toucan.
A malevolent toucan watching, an unhappy married couple killing each other. I don't know.
Well, if we get that, then that's definitely a pattern. But I'll reserve judgment till then.
Inside number minor bird. Anyone?
And that's the end of the podcast.
Never mind.
For good. Well, I'm rarely, I guess, this direct in sort of coming to the point here, but we talked about the ending before, and you were saying you had a take on it. In terms of like the last 2 minutes of the episode, how do you interpret them?
It's not her.
You think the parrot is not?
It's not her.
Not their mother.
It's not her.
Would you like to expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, because on my second rewatch, when they're wrestling with the parrot, I turned the subtitles on so that I could confirm that the parrot is already saying, "What do you want? What do you want?" When they wrestle the parrot and it flies away, it's already saying, "What do you want?"
Yeah.
So either it is okay. That doesn't necessarily prove anything, but either the mother has come back and is incarnated as the parrot, but the parrot is still saying the thing that it said before any of the ritual took place.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, that's the ball game.
That's interesting. Again, you have to decide whether you think the magic works or even potentially works in this universe. But let's say it potentially could. The necromancy could work. Obviously Phil Daniels' character's been killed.
Mm-hmm.
Was he someone she loved? I guess. Was sleeping with. By the logic we've been talked through, the magic logic we've been talked through, that he could have been the sacrifice there. But I'm completely willing to go with your interpretation that where that's not. If your interpretation is correct, or if either way, I suppose. Do you think there's? And I'm willing to run the risk of sounding like the idiot here. Did you pick up on any implication that we, the audience, are meant to know where the treasure is? Or where the money is, or is there an implication for us, to the audience, if not for the boys themselves, that is there a hint there of where the treasure is, or what it is, or because the first time I watched it, I was like, leaving aside the possession or otherwise angle, is it something where the parrot was really expensive or something like that? Is it one of those isn't there a Hitchcock movie where the treasure they're actually looking for, the MacGuffin, is actually a very expensive stamp on an envelope or something like that. I was trying to think in those elements. I was like, is there some implication here that this bird is worth £500,000 or something. Like, is that it just materially is that there but it was me clutching at straws because of the way it ends. I was like, oh, so they don't resolve it, but are we meant to basically have a theory about where the money is, or is that just not part of it?
I didn't think that at all. I thought everything I didn't go down that road at all in my head. I thought that the road that they led us down was narratively the foot hadn't worked, and he says maybe I wasn't something she loved, and then it's Harry saying, oh well, at least we got our sacrifice after all, looking down at Reggie. And then the parrot comes back and they kind of stare at the parrot, and the parrot says, what do you want?
Yeah.
What do you want?
Implying that they're able to ask it a question.
Exactly.
By what we've said.
And then they ask, and you have the foot in full view for some reason on the chair underneath. I think that's all we're meant to think is, has the parrot now been possessed by Annie Blackwood? And
are they about to get their goal? Basically?
Yeah, are they about to get the money? Well, we know it's money, right? We know it's money that's hidden because they talk about it being $1 million, or a foreman, and I don't think I didn't look any further than that. I think for once I didn't hear horses' hooves and look for zebras.
Yeah. No, I totally get you. And I think whether you're, it's not the mother theory or whether it is the mother is correct, and obviously it's ambiguous deliberately. I think I was looking for something more in it, and I think maybe that means I was a bit dissatisfied by it.
Interesting. Yeah. See, I was just taking it on that face value. Like I got to the end of the episode and thought, oh, okay, so we're meant to ask ourselves, has the necromancy worked? Are we in a world where the necromancy works and the mother has come back as Mr. Macy? Is there anything in that? Have you got any theories on why it's called Mr. Macy?
Not really.
Really put you on the spot there. You weren't expecting that, were you?
No, I just shamefully haven't. Again, people in the comments below, if you have, I'm sure there'll be other people who have theories. It seems like something they're probably, I can imagine them putting in as an old horror reference, or reference to a killer or an actual East End figure or something like that. But
quite possibly. But I got to the end and I thought, okay, that's what we meant to think. And also knowing we were going to discuss this, my immediate answer was, I don't know. I don't care. Maybe they don't know. Maybe they don't care. I think at some point you have to say, like, ambiguity is intentional ambiguity, where there isn't an answer one way or the other. Sometimes it's fun to just write something that's ambiguous that could go one way or the other. But when I went back to the watch and the rewatch, and I noticed that the parrot was saying something as they were wrestling it out, and I then went back and turned the subtitles on to make sure I wasn't imagining it saying, "What do you want?" That for me, that was the ball game. That kind of that actually, doesn't happen. It's just the parrot's just come back and is saying what the parrot's always said. Unless you go down a route where the parrot's been taught to say that by their mum, and that leads to, I don't know, that's circles within circles. I don't know.
Well, I think this is maybe getting in a slightly different way, getting back into sort of the bones of St. Nicholas, where you're like, even if this is all supernatural, does it sort of work according to its own rules? Because I think that scene I was talking about where the parrot sat outside looking into the flat, the way that's portrayed, obviously because some dark, dangerous stuff's going on at the time, but I think it's, on rewatch, I kind of took it as the spirit of the mother is already in the parrot and is sort of, or potentially is, and is surveying the flat and is kind of staying close because it's seeing some sort of fate play out, some revenge against Reggie that the mother wants. But then, if you believe that the necromancy that summoned her into the parrot has not yet happened, i.e. Reggie hasn't been stabbed yet, that can't be the case, can it? Whatever else is going on at that stage, it's still a parrot. It's just a parrot.
Well, yeah, and there's another thread there, then, isn't there? That actually the necromancy, the ritual's got nothing to do with it, but is Annie Blackwood in the parrot from the get-go?
Oh, and the ritual's essentially irrelevant.
No, the ritual's irrelevant, but is the mother already in Mr. Macy?
Actually, weirdly, I kind of like that more than anything that we were just talking about. I kind of like that being that, if that was, I'm not saying that should be established without ambiguity, but I think that's kind of my preferred headcanon now that you've just mentioned that. That works better as sort of, there's something going on, but it's not anything that they thought was going on or potentially could be going on,
Yeah, and whenever we go down these little rabbit holes about the nuances and interpretations, I imagine that it's going to be the scene from Annie Hall where Marshall McLuhan walks up in the cinema queue and goes, "You know nothing of my work."
Yeah, Steve Pemberton just walks out and goes, "How you guys got a podcast is completely unbelievable.
You don't know what you're talking about. Never even crossed our minds."
That's our niche. Our niche is that arsehole in the queue from Annie Hall. That's basically
bingo. Yeah,
nailed it. Well, is there? I think we covered that all right. Is there anything else you wanted to
feel like I may
up?
have stolen your thunder with the ending slightly by being so certain that that's not what happened by going back and recognizing that the parrot was saying, "What do you want?" right from the beginning. And the more the more I say this, by the way, the more I really want to do an Al Pacino impression, but I'm resisting.
What do you want? I don't think you did though, because I think I was so underwhelmed by the ambiguous but leaning towards her actually being in the bird ending that your take made me like it more. Just any sort of extra layer, any contrary, even certainty or like more hidden information in the episode, so to speak, that freshens it up for me a bit. Whereas I think without any of that extra perspective or theorizing, it's just a bit flat for me. I think that's the thing. I see it has potential energy in that ambiguity persisting beyond the end credits, but in the moment it didn't really work for me. I was kind of like, is that it? Basically, that was the feeling I had.
Yeah. A bit of a damp squib, but again, you're writing, one episode, 28 minutes. They haven't really got that much time to muck around. So occasionally it's going to feel a little bit rushed, or the endings are going to feel slightly unsatisfactory because maybe they'd written themselves into a corner, and how do you get them out of the room, or how do you get your full stop or ellipses? I think those are two categories of Inside Number 9 as well, aren't they? It's like sometimes it's a full stop and sometimes it's a dot.
Yeah.
The other thing I wanted to mention is not even kind of a joke, but not really a joke. One of the really strong lines that I really loved is that whole scene of Reece Shearsmith going, "I'm afraid you've stumbled into something that's very much a family matter." And I would suggest that, you leave now. I haven't got a problem with either of you. And Phil Daniel's first line's being, "Well, I'm afraid I've got a bit of a fucking problem with you, sunshine." It was glorious. Absolutely wonderful.
Well, just when he hits him with the cup as well. When he smashes
yeah.
The mug.
That was far more affecting than the foot being sawed off.
Yeah, I think that's just that's in that realm of TV violence, isn't it? Where you can just sort of imagine that happening by accident to you, even.
Yeah.
So, but it's just so viscerally mundane. I guess. But yeah.
Again, the coming back to it's just reminded me as well of the visual grammar of it. Maybe this is distinct to George Kane or possibly not, but particularly the bit where he's got the saw and he's going in to cut his head off. You have Franny slightly out of focus in the background of that shot throughout. You can see if you focus on her for a second, you can see that she's reading like the instructions for the ritual, and we've already set up the fact that she's got control over the plug. And it's like, okay, he's not going to cut his head off. So to an extent, I was just kind of going, it's like they're waiting for the saw to go off because, she was being so clearly framed in the background so that we could see that she was reading the ritual and at some point was going to go, hang on a minute, there might be something here.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think when you rewatch most of these episodes, there's so many nice details like that.
Nice details and just really, really good craft from everyone involved as well. It's just really well made, well crafted.
Yeah, no, quite agree. And the good thing at these early stages of these series, we've seen these two and we've got no idea, whereas this left us slightly underwhelmed. In some respects, it was by no means a bad episode, and we've got no idea whether this is, the most whelmed we're going to be, or whether this is somewhere near the bottom of the series as it's going to work out, or this will be towards the top.
Yeah, you mean the bottom of the 9th?
Yes, I like that one.
Thanks. As opposed to you're implying all the other ones.
All the other ones did a bit of work,
shit.
But yeah. but the bottom of the 9th, it's a good one.
Bottom of the 9thly.
Yeah, and you're back on form.
There we go.
Yeah. But yeah, thanks, John. That's great, and we'll be back very soon to discuss the 3rd episode, which has not aired as of the time of this recording, but we'll be watching that this week, and we will be coming back to talk about it.
Like the idea. So can we get, when we get to the final series, can we try and discuss them before we've seen them? Is that what you're
work out pretty well?
Yeah.
Well, given how far we depart from anything supported by the source text, I think that's probably would be about the same.
We'll imagine our very own Inside Number 9 episodes once they are no more.
Love it. Sounds like a plan. Okay.
We're assuming this. Do we know this for a fact that they're going to stop at season 9? Has this been announced? Has this been?
I think they've said in interviews that they're putting it on like hiatus, sort of indefinite hiatus after series 9, partly because they just want to do other stuff and they sort of feel like it's extraordinary it's lasted this long anyway. But I think they've definitely said, we're not definitely saying that's the end, but it'll be the end for a bit or something like that.
Here's my hot take theory. So first of all, I kind of think it's absolutely the right thing to do. I think I'd been more annoyed to find out that they were doing a series 10 than I would to find out that there's not, 9 is it. But that's not going to stop them doing like one-off specials or episodes, is it? I wouldn't, if I were a betting man, I wouldn't bet on the last episode of Series 9 being the last ever episode of Inside Number 9, but I think it will be the last series of Inside Number 9. I think I think you'd be mad to do a 10th series of something that is so neatly tied around the conceit of it all being about Number 9. I think you'd be crazy.
Yeah, I mean, we'll talk about this more when the series is over, but I am fascinated by what a nominally final series of Number 9 is going to be like, but that's a whole other range of speculation.
I think it is. I think to an extent, I think it'll be more of the same. I don't think it'll change them, because the beauty of the format is that you just carry on, you come up with more, extraordinary, or you just try to come up with ideas that you think are interesting that you haven't already done, or as in a number of cases, maybe just things they want to do for fun, characters they like playing, people who have got in touch and said that they want to be in an episode, and you got Phil Daniels on the phone. Well, let's go Cockney Gangster.
I think that'll be true until the moment they realise the sort of moment of the final episode. There is which one is going to be the final one, and then they might put some stuff into it. But I've just realised we're doing exactly what you joked that we would do, which is talk about episodes that don't exist yet.
Oh yeah. Oh, there we go.
So yeah.
There we go. Well, also I've got a parrot on my shoulder.
Yeah.
Telling me stuff in my ear from
if I could ask,
from the beyond.
If I can ask you one thing. No, I'll leave it. Leave it.
What would it be if you could ask me one thing, and I'll reply as a parrot. This episode's over. This episode was over. Several. Anyone who's still hanging in there, thanks and goodbye.
Yeah, come for the analysis and stay for the parrot impersonations. All right. Well, yes, he already said it. Goodbye. Say goodbye, John.
Goodbye.
See you next time.
Confidence is a preference for the habitual voyeur of what is known as. A morning suit can be avoided if you take a route straight through what is known as. John's got brewer's fruit, he gets intimidated by the dirty pigeons. They love a bit of him. Who's that gut lord marching? You should cut down on your pork life, mate. Get some exercise.